Hello and welcome to the Monocle Weekly. For today's show, I speak with producer and scholar Beppe Savoni, also founder of Disco Bambino, a project celebrating Italian disco. It seems the genre is back full force, thanks to people like Beppe and a young generation celebrating those Italian artists from the 70s. Here is Beppe with more about his Disco Bambino. Beppe Savoni, what a pleasure having you here on Monocle Radio, because I am a huge fan, of everything you do. Basically, you're a DJ, you're a scholar, you're an Italian disco enthusiast, and your Instagram account is probably one of the best I've seen out there.
Thank you.
Beppe, I just want to ask you a little bit more about your background. I mean, you are based in New York, but of course you are from Italy, right? Were you always, from a very young age, interested in that period of Italian music? And I wonder if you can tell us more about this period that you focus in particular.
Yes, as you said, I live in New York now, but I was born and raised in Italy, in a small town in southern Italy, in a region called Puglia. And this whole interest in disco music, it's been really since the very beginning of my life. Sometimes I think that I'm the reincarnation of somebody, I don't know, of a DJ or something, because the earliest memory, really, it's when I was 3 years old, 4 years old, dancing on the table for my family, dancing, in front of a mirror. So there's always been this incredible connection to music since the very early years of my life. And, my mom always says that since I was a kid, I never asked for toys. I would always ask for records. And I also had the luck to have my cousin who was my babysitter. I was like 4 or 5. Both my parents were working. And my older cousin, she was 16, 17. So we're talking about the end of the 70s. That really is the period when disco music was really strong and discotheques. So instead of taking me to the park, taking me to see other kids, she would take me with her to these disco clubs. And I would just love it. I would just be there dancing on the dance floor, being surrounded by this incredible energy of these kids being themselves, because, discotheques were these incredible places where people could liberate themselves. And so I was part of that. And the reason why I call this whole project Disco Bambino, it's really because it connects so much to my inner bambino.
You were the Disco Bambino when you were a kid.
I am the Disco Bambino since I was really a kid. So yes, it's always been there. It's never been an interest that I developed later. It's very primitive to me.
One thing that strikes me, even looking at your page, but let's talk about someone that is perhaps our, a lot of our listeners will recognize her, the wonderful Raffaella Carrà. Even if you look at the older videos, I mean, it's strange. It feels very current, So many of the pop stars we see today, very young. I mean, my God, Carrà was doing, and sometimes the outfit didn't change very much. If you think about it. So it is a very influential period if you think about it, right?
It is. And there are a couple of really interesting things about this. The first is that, if we think of the 70s in Italy, the social, political background was very rough. There were like kidnappings, bombings, terrorist attacks. There was like really strong conflicts between the extreme left and the extreme right. So out of this tension, the first interesting thing is that there's all this art coming out, right? People need needed to escape, to be creative. And then the other interesting fact is that everything was experimentation. That's what I really love about that period. There was really no reference. There was no playbook. Nobody was saying, oh, let's try this because someone else has done it. Maybe there were like some references that would come from here, from there, from the UK, from America, but they would be very faint. There was no internet. So everything that was going on at the time was just, okay, let's try it and let's see if it works. So it was pure experimentation. And that experimentation kind of set the tone for a lot of other decades that came after. Those were the years where a lot of designers, kind of created and formed their aesthetics, Italian designers, of course. So it was a great fountain of inspiration that then obviously developed, also kind of being contaminated with a lot of other influences. And so it developed this kind of really unique universe, that I love and a lot of people still love today.
They do. And I see, it's interesting, even on social media platforms, like even younger than Instagram, like TikTok, for example, there's so many kind of Italo disco or Italian songs from that period being played. And the people are posting, they're practically teenagers.
That's right. A lot of them are very young. To them, it feels really out there. Today, we like to think of us as evolved, under many aspects free, but, we get so many kind of rules from the outside world, right? And so many parameters that whenever we see a video or a song from that era, to us, it feels completely free and, completely really out there. And I think a lot of people connect with that, their desire to be free, to think out of the box. It's reflected in those images and in that music.
And I felt that in one of your latest posts about someone that I did not know, which is Nadia Cassini. And for me, it was sexy, hypnotic. I don't know, maybe transcendental even, Yeah. I was in love with that video, and thank you for showing us something that, Raffaella Carrà, a lot of people know she's amazing, but Nadia Cassini, perhaps, at least I didn't know.
I can hear you calling.
Watch the sky.
Oh,
Slowly landing.
as it started sounding.
Slowly landing. Floating on.
Just floating on.
Floating on.
Floating on.
Floating on.
Floating on in from the night.
Million light years.
Yeah, Nadia Cassini, it's a very, very interesting figure, from that era that I love. I keep posting her videos because me too, even though I used to see her on TV when I was a kid, and still today when I see her performances, the costumes, I really find it truly incredible. And she's a very interesting character because she kind of came from the world of the erotic comedy, like kind of B-movie world, from the Italian culture and entertainment world of those years. And then she started becoming kind of a vedette for these Italian variety shows. She was extremely beautiful. She was the dream of many Italians. And then she also recorded music, and actually she has one album, that her first album, that it's musically, it's incredible. Because obviously they would put together these great producers, great arrangers, studios to create obviously that, business entertainment machine around her. But, what it's seen as a one-shot kind of thing, skip 40 years, 50 years, it sounds innovative, it sounds new, like nothing else out there. So it's really wonderful that people are interested in Nadia Cassini, who passed away a couple of years ago. So to me, this is really, really wonderful.
Yeah, we're missing all the divas, with Ornella recently as well.
Yes.
Pepe, I was, I was going to ask you as well, because you're not just a scholar. Besides showcasing all this beautiful work, you are a musician. I mean, you play. You've released a few singles and a few compilations as well. So it's nice. So you're actually taking some action, because some of those tracks, they're not so easy to find, actually. So I think there's a lot of hard work. I'm sure you have to talk about the rights. And I mean, you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I start as a musician, producer. That's what brought me to New York in 1997. I came to New York to work in music, and I did. I signed back then. I was signed to a label. I was doing a very different kind of music. I was doing house music, and then it kind of evolved into other things. But there is one constant since I was a kid, and that was the one of collecting records, vinyl records. So imagine, since the beginning of my life, in my childhood, still today, I just love the physical medium, records themselves, for the way they sound, also the artwork and the way they're put together. Everything about it really intrigues me. So that to me was the base to kind of also start digging into these unknown producers, unknown singers, people that, I don't know, put some money together and released a single in 1979, 1980, and then it's completely forgotten because nobody cared about it. So I love to kind of dig deep and then bring it back, whether it's through a DJ set, whether it's through a rework, or even like, composing new music, but getting inspiration from, those melodies, those drums, those synths, those, voices. So in a way, what I do, it's kind of rediscovering, things that have happened in the past so that they're not forgotten, but at the same also showing the world out there that this is inspiration that can generate new things. It's not museum stuff that kind of stays on a pedestal. You watch it, you see it, you hear it. And people are getting inspiration, even contemporary musicians, whether they're recording, they're singing, they're making a music video, they're designing a cover for their music. It's a constant fountain of inspiration. And I try to kind of reflect it in everything I do, whether it's DJ set, making music, Instagram, mixtapes, you name it. But I love it because it's such a complex universe that cannot be expressed through one single thing. So that's what I try to do.
I want it all. And it's funny, we're talking about influences. I mean, even the Queen, Madonna. I mean, this is a rumor, by the way, I have to tell our listeners. But apparently there might be a cover of Patti Bravo, Pensiero Stupendo. I hope so, but that's interesting. So I think even someone like Madonna probably took some inspiration from that period, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and she's not the only one. There's a lot of people, that whether it's music, whether it's style, it's look, are either, it's a coincidence, or they're, directly take inspiration from that era, those artists from, the Italian late 70s, early 80s. I think there was a few years ago that I didn't even think about it until somebody pointed it out. I posted a video of this Italian singer. She's very active still now. She's wonderful, Jo Squillo, and she was performing in 1985, a song on TV with the white hair and a kind of a cape dress, the round glasses, and then somebody wrote to me, it's like, isn't this Lady Gaga from the Fame period? And then I said, you are totally right. But is it inspiration? Is it coincidence? Is it, it's all very fluid today, of course, as we know. Everything inspires everybody, but it's very, much, it's like I said, it's something that is still very much alive 40, 50 years later, that inspired artists in many different ways.
Beppe, if somebody, let's say, who perhaps don't know much about Italian disco, I wonder if you can give us perhaps 3 recommendations of someone that is like, okay, this is, you need to learn this before you come to my account and have a look at someone like Nadia Cassini.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Italian disco is that as soon as it started developing, it really went almost straight into mainstream culture. There was a moment that it was kind of underground, that only people going out to gay clubs or certain places would be exposed to, but it entered TV right away. If you see some of the TV shows from the late 70s, you'd be surprised for what they perform, what they sing, what they dance, etc. So I'll give you kind of like 3 levels, right?
Perfect.
For this starter pack. For the main level, let's say the mainstream level, I would start really with people like popular artists, characters like Donatella Rettore, her early albums like 1979, Splendido Splendente, that's like a good start. Yeah, Ornella Vanoni, Ti Voglio, Raffaella Carrà, there are some things that she did that are kind of pretty disco, especially her album from 1978, 79. So let's say if you dig into like the divas, of the mainstream culture of Italy, you'll find something.
C'erano in me. Mi piace, immagini, baci, cosa importa volere sapere domani cos'è.
Then, you go into like a B level, level 2, let's just say, that it's a little bit more obscure, and there are, characters like Nadia Cassini. I highly recommend. I think it's called Close Encounters, her first album. I think it's Close Encounters of the Loving Kind, something like
Love
that,
it.
which is incredible.
Don't resist
Can I
it.
move into you?
Your mind.
Whoa,
Make it happen.
almost going through you.
Let me help you. Close your eyes.
I close my eyes.
Close your eyes.
Just close my eyes.
Close your eyes.
I close my eyes. I'm lost in the night.
Let me show you.
You're my very breathing.
And you should see also the artwork and the inner sleeve. It's really gorgeous, beautiful. And, there's her, or there's another band called Le Streghe, which, again, kind of, almost an unknown band that got together to do a disco album. So that's that. But then if you keep digging, there are producers. You start focusing on certain producers that did music. And then, they were releasing singles here and there, naming it always differently with a different band. And so if you look for Celso Valli, which is another incredible producer that passed away a few months ago, he has an incredible, obscure disco production.
Casino, casino, the dice are rolling. Casino, fais pas jeu. Casino, casino, the dice are rolling. Casino, fais pas jeu. Oh, casino, you can make yourself a fortune.
And also Mauro Malavasi, which is also an Italian producer. I believe he's from Bologna, who produced incredible tracks that a lot of people even think it's American disco, but it's Italian disco. These are more or less the 3 levels. Maybe, I speak very quickly, so I don't know if you had the time to take notes, but maybe you can replay the interview if you're listening to this and note it down.
I think people should do that. And a very random question now, that just so people don't get confused, but they are similar and different. I don't know, you tell me. What's the difference of Italian disco and Italo disco? They live sometimes in the same world, but is it? What do you think?
Well, the general perception is that anything that is produced in Italy, or it sounds Italian, or is sung in Italian, it's labeled as Italo disco. So I've wanted to make the distinction between Italian disco and Italo disco since the very beginning when I started doing this Disco Bambino. And the reason why is that it's really 2 different genres, 2 different styles that belong to 2 different eras. So let's say Italian disco starts from, let's say, 1970s, like really early 70s. And some people even claim that there are things even in the late 60s. And it kind of goes up to 1980, while the Italo disco starts from 1981, 82, and kind of goes on until 1987, 88. There are many differences between the two of them, but I would say that Italian disco is a genre that is mainly played by acoustic instruments, and so real bass, real piano, real guitar, etc. And it was a style of music that was performed by real musicians. I mean, if we think of Italy, early 70s, it was musicians coming from orchestras, like had a classical background. So they were, they knew how to play these instruments. While Italo disco, it's more the era of the synthesizers, right? So it's when synthesizers started becoming commercially available and affordable. So a lot of DJs, non-musicians or music enthusiasts, that's when they start producing music. And also an interesting thing that I thought about, in this lately, even the experience of how the people live the experience of dancing to Italian disco versus dancing Italo disco. Italian disco and as a genre, it's a very collective kind of experience. So people would go to the clubs in the early mid-70s, late 70s, to be together, to be with other people and share their passion for music, passion for fun. While later in the 80s, the disco scene kind of starts becoming fragmented. And the experience of going to a club, it's very individualistic. It's also the years when the club scene, club culture starts becoming very fragmented, right? There were clubs that played disco, but there were clubs that played new wave. There were clubs playing other styles of music. So there are very, very strong differences. And when I talk about this, I always play some, music, some examples to tell people it's two different worlds in many different ways.
Thank you for the lesson. I'm a fan of both, but I wanted to clarify that. So I think you explained it perfectly. And Beppe, a question. 2026, are you excited? As a fan here, I want to know if you have any projects or, whatever you can tell us. I'm sure there'll be a more amazing post to Disco Bambino, but I wonder if there are upcoming releases or gigs. I don't know.
Yes, I mean, there will be gigs for sure, as always. The gigs thing, it's so funny because I was never a real DJ, but I kind of had to reinvent myself because people wanted to listen to this music in a club, context. So for sure there will be plenty of gigs, especially in Europe, but also in US. There are some really interesting things going on. I've been kind of I locked myself up in the studio for the past 2 months. So I've been collaborating with a lot of really interesting artists. It's still a little bit confidential right now, but some of them really young, some of them are really known, trying to, again, bring that type of universe, sonic universe, into the studio to create something new. So look for, some new music from Disco Bambino. And then always, there's always this newsletter that I curate with my dear friend Angelica Frey. It's called Italian Disco Stories, where we kind of talk about the literature of Italian disco. When you hear disco, it's always like kind of a listening experience, but we love to tell the stories of the producers that, were behind this world, the artists, that sometimes we go deep into arrangements and, certain songs, certain albums. So yeah, I will do my best to, collect the energy to keep doing this even into 2026.
Thank you, Beppe. You can follow him on Instagram at disco_bambino. Stay tuned for new music from him as well, coming out this spring. DJ gigs in February and March in Europe and the US, and a university tour to talk about Italian disco culture to students in US and Europe. This show was edited by Steph Chungu, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Thank you for listening.